Numbers! Hello everyone and welcome to another devlog. This week I'm going to talk about everyone's favorite subject, not just in game dev, but in general. It's math. Math! Everybody loves math, right? Numbers! Specifically what I want to talk about is scaling of attacks, and this kind of came up because of recently we played Starship Origins, and Epic Wings before that had an issue where they had items that seemed to scale based on the character's attack rating, and I kind of took issue with that, especially in Epic Wings 2, where you had characters who had nothing to do, so it was like, oh, I'll use this handy-dandy damage item that you've given me, but it would do crap damage because that character had crap attack. And in Starship Origins, the same thing was happening, where I had these healers who had nothing. Whenever they had a turn with nothing to do, I wanted to use a grenade, but their grenades are so much weaker than the actual damage characters, so I was like, okay. So my suggestion was I wanted the attacks to be based more on level rather than some sort of attack stat, something more neutral that every character would possess. So I wanted to kind of demonstrate my own formulas and how I've encountered a similar problem where, you see I have pistol tier 1, 2, 3, sword 1, 2. I don't actually have attack rating type, or attack or M attack. I just scaled attacks based on level. Each level you basically get 10% more damage. But the way it works is each of these weapons and each of these attacks is just its own damage formula. So like, or sword tier 1 will do 40 damage, and then sword tier 2 will do 60 damage. So, you get these big jumps. Basically that leads to this problem where you get this very spiky damage curve. So you see you might start off as 40, but by the time you find a tier 2, which I plan to be happening around level 6, you would find a tier 2 sword, so you'd jump up to 90. So you'd have this, imagine this graph goes here and then spikes up here. So how do I have my attacks that don't have so much itemization behind them to match these curves? And I'll show you in a second. I just wanted to mention that on this graph I have things like destabilizer plus bonus. That means these attacks have one piece of gear. This attack called Deadly Strike has no gear. This is all leveling. And you can probably guess, if you know how math works, why it's curved like this, and the answer is exponents. So if you look at my formula here, ignore this round. I'm just doing that so I can see a number that looks like what it'll look like in RPG Maker, because it automatically rounds everything. And you'll see that I have this 7 times A2. A2 is the column where I have like just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just to kind of simulate the levels in my game. So you see for each level, you get 7 damage on the first level, 14 damage on the next level. This part of the equation is a linear growth that kind of helps it to have a steady increase like these guys do. But then I have this kind of slow burn exponential formula here. You notice this is a number is very strange, because if you've ever dealt with exponents, you know that they get outrageous really fast. And because my game has such low levels, I mean, I guess this is true if you have high levels too, that exponents can get out of hand, like really fast. So I had to use a very strange number that's less than 2, because even a number as low as 2 would make this go kind of crazy for my small damage number game. I guess if you had a bigger damage number game, then you'd have a less fear of using exponents. So I had to kind of guess around with numbers to kind of figure this out. So I kind of have these. I started doing this. I should have done this more, which is these formulas are going to pull from these cells here. So like if I change this to 4, this will change the linear growth part of it. And this number right here is that's the exponent, right? Yeah, this is the exponent. So if I change this number to 1.39, you'll see that, actually I'll just change it to 1.4. You'll see that it grows towards the end, but does not really affect the early ones, because these numbers I have are so small that they end up kind of basically being rounded out in the earlier levels. So that's good, because that's what I want. I have these gear equipments that come later on that create these jumps later on, so it needs to catch up to those. And so if you go back to the chart, you'll see this Deadly Strike is kind of curving out of hand. This is because these other ones I've been recently kind of refiguring out to get their damage curves to make more sense. And I have not done the same with this one, so it kind of is going out of control. But yeah, these other ones, when I mentioned they have a gear bonus, they have a times 50%. So basically, even though there's no weapons for these spells, there's a piece of equipment that you can equip at some point in the game. Increases damage significantly. So the chart is useful because this gives me a quick visual of like how things are going to look compared to each other. So you see I have pistol tier 1, but I don't have sword tier 3. That's because they actually do the same amount of damage. I'm trying to maintain this idea of like how much damage each attack does, and it's based on like cost. So obviously swords, you can just use them whenever you want. They're the easiest, cheapest thing to do. Destabilizer and nullifier cost mana, so those should be a little more powerful because you run out of mana very fast. And pistol has the highest cost because it costs a limited resource that you have to scavenge to find. So you notice I try to keep that, adhere to that a bit. See at the beginning, pistol or sword tier 1 is 40, and destabilizer is 70, so it's like 75% more damage. So by the time you get to tier 6, that gap is pretty close if you don't have the gear that you can find, because the piece of gear that you get for the destabilizer is supposed to also show up around tier 2. But if you get the piece of gear, boom, you jump all the way up here. Which puts you pretty close to pistol 2, tier 2, which is maybe not perfect, but it's okay because especially towards the end here where you see things are getting pretty close, and certain parts are pretty close and things are pretty far away. Like destabilizer plus bonus is pretty high compared to sword tier 3. But that's fine because, and the same thing, pistol tier 3 is kind of a bit higher than destabilizer with the bonus. But that's okay because each thing has kind of pluses and minuses. You know, I can't get some sort of perfect alignment of like always maintaining like 15% more damage or 20% more damage or however much I've decided at the beginning. Yeah, there's definitely pluses and minuses that come in late game. Pistols can crit and then get pretty high crit rate once you have all your gear, and destabilizer can't crit, so that's kind of the plus minus situation there. But destabilizer does energy damage, which means it ignores armor. And pistol is physical damage, so it doesn't ignore armor. So you know there's trade-offs here and there. So what do I recommend for the average person? The average person, I would say, you know, just consider like think about ways of making damage formulas like this, at least this part. The exponents is obviously a bit crazy. You maybe don't have to do that. You know, it depends on how your attack scaling works in your game. You might just be able to get away with, you know, if your attack scaling is fairly linear, then you can just stick with the linear part of the formula. It scales to your character's level. You know, there's all sorts of crap you can do in RPG Maker. You've got the power of JavaScript behind, you know, you're not limited to just multiplication, addition, subtraction. You can do exponents, you can do all sorts of crap. You can do multiple equations. There's so many things you can do. When I complain a lot about damage of characters and damage differences, I get this suspicion that the dev didn't do something like this, where they're like planning and comparing numbers and looking at growth and stuff. You know, at some point, different types of damage are just better. And that's where you run into this problem with a lot of JRPGs, where you just end up auto-attacking, because usually the problem is your auto-attack scales based on some sort of weapon or a bunch of equipment, and then they, for some reason, choose a different damage formula that doesn't scale as well, so it just falls behind. So, you know, just think about numbers, think about charts, you know, plan things. Obviously, it's a bit harder if you have your game go to level 99, because that's a lot of levels to plan, but I guess my advice to that is don't make a game that goes to level 99. Like, I don't know, it's not interesting. Like, have a game where each level is special and feels like an actual jump in growth, and, you know, kind of plan out the experience. Don't just press a button in RPG Maker or in a plugin and expect it to do it for you. You should, you know, craft it to the experience you want to create. You know, all of these numbers have to do with how quickly the enemies can be defeated. So every time I design an enemy, I have this handy chart, and I can think like, oh, Players can one-shot this guy. If they do this, or if they do that, they can kill in 2 hits if they do this or that, right? Like, I'm always thinking about the players' strategies and things they can do. Alright, well, that's probably a bit too long of a video for such a simple subject, and just for looking at charts in Excel. So I guess I'll see you guys next time.